They say America makes you free, but they never tell you free from what. When you hit 40, freedom feels less like a dream and more like a slow kind of loneliness, a kind that creeps into your bones and sits there, quietly waiting. My name's Jack Reaves. I sell land in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, mostly dry dirt, broken dreams, cheap whiskey, and men who think the desert will cleanse them. It doesn't. It just strips you down to who you really are. I wasn't always like this. I used to believe in structure of marriage, work, routine. Then somewhere along the line, all that cracked. Not in one big explosion, but in small, quiet fractures that only I could feel. It started 2 years ago, when Claire stopped looking at me like I was real. We'd been married 12 years. 2 kids, 1 dog, mortgage, the usual setup. She was beautiful in that shallow way, strong jaw, dark eyes, the kind that once saw right through me. Then one night, she didn't come home. Car trouble, she said later. Except she doesn't drive. She takes the train. You don't want to believe it. At 40, you cling to your delusions like they're oxygen. You build a wall of routines, a coffee at 7, work at 8, silence at night, and pretend that wall keeps you safe. But I saw the signs. The way she smiled at her phone. The late-night meetings. The new perfume that wasn't hers. And one morning, when she came out of the shower, I noticed a bruise on her shoulder. Soft, oval, human. I didn't say anything. Not for days. Instead, I drove into the desert. It's what I do when I don't know who I am anymore. Out there, time slows down. You can feel yourself dissolve into something older than language. There's a place I go, an abandoned diner off Route 86. Been closed since '93. But the sign still buzzes at night, faint and broken. Eat here. That's where I met Mason. He was leaning against a rusted Chevy, cigarette between his fingers, watching the horizon like it owed him money. You lost? He asked. Always, I said. He laughed, that low, rasping kind of laugh that sounds like gravel in your throat. We talked for an hour about nothing, weather, roads, the kind of whiskey that doesn't taste like regret. He said he worked construction up north, but I could tell that was a lie. His hands were too clean, his voice too calm. Still, he felt familiar. Like someone who'd already lived through everything I was just starting to feel. Over the next few weeks, I found myself going back. To the diner. To the silence. To Mason. It wasn't friendship. Not really. It was more like recognition. To men orbiting the same void. He talked about freedom. About burning everything down and starting over. He said he once had a wife too. She wanted a man who could stay still. I wanted a man who could breathe. When I told him about Claire, he didn't ask questions. Just said, "You'll know what to do when you stop pretending you don't." That line stuck with me. Like a splinter under the skin. A month later, I followed Claire. Not far, just enough to see the truth. She met someone behind the old motel near the interstate. A silver truck pulled up. She got in. They didn't see me. I watched them drive off. My hands were shaking. But not from anger. From relief. The waiting was over. I followed at a distance, headlights off. They stopped in the desert about a mile out near the same ridge where Mason liked to park. I sat there in the dark, engine off, listening to the sand whisper under the wind. The moonlight hit her face as she laughed, soft, bright, the same way she used to laugh with me. Then I saw him. The man she was with. It was Mason. For a while, I just watched them. Her hand on his chest. His mouth on her neck. I couldn't even feel anger. Just a deep, hollow kind of recognition, like watching a rerun of your own worst mistake. I started the car, drove home, and didn't sleep for 2 days. You'd think betrayal burns hot, but it doesn't. It's cold. It moves through you slow, like frost, until everything inside turns still. I didn't tell Claire I knew. I didn't tell Mason either. I just kept going back to the diner, waiting for something to break. A week later, he showed up again. Same Chevy, same smirk. Rough week? He asked. Something like that, I said. He looked at me, really looked, and smiled. You found out. I didn't ask how he knew. Men like him always know. He took a drag, flicked the cigarette, and said, "Now what?" And I realized I had no answer. Because the truth wasn't about Claire anymore. Or him. It was about me. About the part of me that let this happen, the part that wanted to feel alive. Even if it meant destroying everything that made me human. That night, Mason said something I'll never forget. There's no such thing as betrayal. Jack, just people remembering who they really are. He got in his truck and drove away. I never saw him again, but I knew I would. Somewhere, somehow in the next life, the next town, or the next sin, because some people don't leave. They echo. And the desert never forgets an echo. You don't really plan revenge. It plans you. Weeks passed after that night, but the silence between me and Claire grew heavier. It wasn't the silence of anger, it was the silence of strangers who used to share a bed. Every morning she made coffee. Every evening she smiled just enough to pass for normal. But her eyes, they were already living another life. And I let her. Maybe I even wanted her to, because deep down, I was waiting. Not for her, but for Mason. He'd vanished, no calls, no sightings at the diner, no silver truck on the roadside. But the desert doesn't erase people. It buries them in layers of dust and rumor. I started asking questions. Drove out to old construction sites, bars with broken neon, motels that smelled of bleach and secrets. Sometimes I swore I could still smell his cologne, tobacco, and motor oil in the air. Then one night, I found a clue. There's a small town called St. Elma, half an hour past the interstate. You can drive through it in 3 minutes, blink, and miss it. There's a bar there called the Mirage, where the lost come to drink like they're practicing for death. The bartender was an old woman named Nora. Gray hair, cigarettes stacked like ammunition. When I showed her a photo of Mason's truck, she froze just for a heartbeat. You looking for him? She asked. I need to talk to him. She smiled without warmth. Men like him don't talk. They listen, and then they disappear. But when I slid 100 across the counter, her tune changed. He was here. Couple nights ago. Had a woman with him, a dark hair, city type. Left in a hurry, paid cash. Drove south. Claire has dark hair. I don't remember driving south. I just remember the road turning into a blur of black asphalt and yellow lines. My hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. The world out there is wide, empty, and brutally honest. There's no noise to hide behind and no excuses. Just your heartbeat, your thoughts, and the wind screaming what you already know. You're not the man you thought you were. I stopped at a gas station outside of Nogales. The attendant said he'd seen the truck parked near the cliffs 3 days ago. No one came back for it. That's how I found the canyon dry, carved into red stone, like a wound left open too long. The truck was there, door open, dust gathering on the seats. But there was no one inside. Just a motel key. Room 12, the La Paloma Inn. I checked in the next morning, pretending not to shake. The receptionist didn't even look up from her magazine when she handed me the key. Room 12 smelled of sweat, smoke, and cheap bourbon. The bed was made. On the nightstand, I found a photo, black and white, folded and worn. It showed Mason, younger, standing beside a man in a suit. My father. My throat closed up. My father had died 20 years ago in a fire. Or at least that's what I'd been told. The company he worked for had settled quietly, said it was an accident. But there he was alive, smiling, with the man who'd ruined my marriage. I sat there for hours, the photo trembling in my hands, trying to breathe through the weight pressing on my chest. Then I heard it knock, slow, 3 times. I opened the door, expecting Claire. It was Mason. He looked older, like something inside him had burned out. The desert had carved its truth into his face. You found it, he said, looking at the photo in my hand. What the hell is this? Why is my father in that picture? He stepped in, closed the door behind him. Because he's not dead. I didn't move. You're lying. No, Jack. He's been alive all this time. And he's the reason I met your wife. I laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds more like breaking. What are you talking about? Your father wanted to protect you, he said. He made a deal, one that bought him out of the fire, out of his name. But someone had to keep an eye on you. Make sure you never came looking. I stared at him. So, he sent you. He nodded slowly. He sent me. And Claire. The room spun. My knees gave out. I wanted to hit him, to kill him, to destroy the face that had been haunting my nights, but my body wouldn't move. He sat across from me, calm as always. She didn't mean for it to go that far. Neither did I, but sometimes lies grow roots. I finally found my voice. You're saying my wife was working for my father? That you both? Yes. Silence. Just the hum of the air conditioner, the faint buzz of flies against the window, I looked at the photo again. My father, smiling. Mason, standing beside him like a shadow. And I realized what had been gnawing at me for months, that nothing about my life had ever been mine. Even my pain had been assigned. He reached for the photo, but I pulled it away. "Where is he?" I asked. Mason's eyes softened. "He doesn't want to be found." "Too bad," I said. "I'm done following orders." He looked at me for a long time, then whispered, "Be careful what you dig up, Jack. Some graves are empty for a reason." Then he left out no sound. No goodbye, of just the soft click of the door, and the smell of dust and tobacco fading into the air. I didn't sleep that night. The desert outside the window looked almost alive, breathing, waiting. I thought of Claire, of my father, of Mason's warning. But it didn't matter, because now I wasn't a husband or a son. I was a man chasing ghosts. And in America, ghosts are easy to find. They're the only things that never stop watching. The desert teaches you how to listen. Not to people, they only ever tell half the truth, but to the wind, to the silence between words, to the space where lies echo after the voice is gone. I left La Paloma at dawn. The sky was a bruise-colored blur, the horizon bleeding into itself. Mason was gone. His truck too. But the photograph stayed burned into my mind, my father's face, alive when the world said he was ashes. 4 years I'd built my life around that story, the fire, the funeral, the empty urn. And now all of it was gone, rewritten by strangers who claimed they'd been protecting me. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. So I drove. The road to Tucson felt endless. The kind that stretches your thoughts until they break. I needed answers, and there was only one place that could give them: Cane and Marrow Industries, the company where my father had died. They'd built half the state on lies and concrete. I used to drive past their new tower every week. A glass monolith standing where nothing human belonged. Now I looked at it differently, not as a monument of success, but as a grave that never stopped expanding. I parked across the street and watched the employees come and go. Men in tailored suits, women with clipped voices, all of them moving like ghosts in daylight. One of them, Helen Ward, my father's former assistant, was still there. I remembered her from when I was a kid. She used to bring me candy when I waited in the lobby. I followed her into the cafe next door. "Jack Reaves," she said when I finally sat across from her. Her tone was half surprise, half fear. "I thought you moved east." I did. But something brought me back. I placed the photo on the table. "Do you know anything about this?" Her eyes froze. She didn't touch the picture. Didn't even blink. "Where did you get that?" "From the man standing next to him," I said. "Mason." The name drained the color from her face. "You shouldn't say that name here," she whispered. "If he's still around, it means they never finished the cleanup." "Cleanup?" Ellen leaned closer. "Your father found something. A ledger, proof of offshore accounts tied to arms contracts and missing money. He tried to expose it, and Kane wanted him gone. They staged the fire. He survived. But to stay alive, he had to disappear. Mason was one of them, a handler. His job was to watch you. And your wife." The room felt smaller, heavier. So Claire was part of this too. She didn't know the full story. She was brought in through Mason. He used her to get close to you. To make sure you never started digging. I wanted to deny it, to call it another story layered over the last one. But something about her tone, calm, resigned, made me believe it. "Where is he now?" I asked. She shook her head. "If Mason's gone dark, he's either dead or gone back to your father. Either way, you're in danger. They'll come for the photo." I slipped it back into my jacket. "Let them try." Ellen sighed. "You're just like him." "Like who?" "Your father. Always chasing the truth as if it'll save you." "It won't." When I left the cafe, I caught a reflection in the window of a black SUV parked across the street. To men inside, watching, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove back to the desert. The same diner. The same broken sign buzzing in the dark. "Eat here." The lights were off. Dust had swallowed everything. But on the counter, someone had left a note. "If you're reading this, you've already chosen the road. Don't stop now." I'm underneath it. Another photograph. My father, again older this time, standing in front of a small cabin somewhere in the desert hills. I recognized the ridge line. It was south of Ajo, near the old mining camp. I found the cabin by midnight. The wind screamed through the cracks, the door hanging loose. Inside, It smelled of dust and kerosene. There was a table, 2 chairs, a stack of old papers, and a half-empty bottle of bourbon, and a man sitting in the shadows. "Jack," he said, his voice gravel and memory. "You took your time." For a second, I couldn't breathe. He looked older, thinner, but it was him, my father. "I buried you," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "Then you did what I couldn't. You let go." He told me everything. About the ledger, the book filled with names and numbers that tied the corporation to illegal trades, black budgets, people who disappeared. He tried to expose it, but the system ate him alive. Kane offered him a deal: vanish or die. Mason had been his insurance policy, a man who worked both sides, keeping tabs on everyone. He'd been assigned to me years ago, first through small coincidences, later through Claire. "She wasn't supposed to fall for you," my father said quietly. "But she did." And that's when Mason lost control of the story. I stared at the bottle, then at him. "You could have stopped this. You could have told me." He shook his head. "You were safer not knowing." Until Mason broke rank, something inside me cracked. All the anger, all the grief, it wasn't righteous anymore. It was heavy, aimless, and old. "What now?" I asked. He looked at me, the way fathers look at sons when they know they've already failed them. "Now you leave it alone. Burn what's left. Walk away." "I can't." "Yes, you can. You think vengeance makes you free, but it just changes the shape of your cage." Outside, headlights cut through the dark. The SUV from Tucson. My father's eyes went wide. "They found us." He grabbed the ledger and shoved it into my hands. "Run." "But you run, Jack." The first bullet shattered the window. The second hit the wall behind me. I dove out the back, into the cold night air, the ledger pressed against my chest. The cabin erupted behind me with splintering flames licking the sky. And in that fire, I saw him again, my father, standing still, unafraid. The fire that never burned had finally found him. I drove until dawn, the ledger sitting beside me on the seat, its pages whispering with every bump of the road. I didn't know if my father was dead, or if I'd just watched him disappear for the second time, but I knew this much: if I opened that book, there would be no going back. And maybe that's what he wanted. Maybe that's what Mason wanted to. Because sometimes, the truth isn't something you find. It's something that finds you, and never lets go. There's a moment after a man loses everything when the world becomes painfully clear. No noise, no confusion. Just the quiet understanding that there's no one left to lie to, not even yourself. That's what the desert does. It burns away everything false. And when all that's left is truth, you realize how heavy it really is. The ledger lay open on the passenger seat beside me, its pages yellowed and stiff. It looked like any other old book, no mystery in the leather, no secrets in the ink. But every name inside was a debt. Every number, a life sold. As the sun rose, I stopped by the roadside, pulled the car over, and finally started reading. The first few pages were simple records, contracts, transfer codes, initials. Then came the lists, not of money, but of people. Men and women relocated, removed, reassigned. The last page was dated June 19, 2003. My father's name was there, marked extinguished. Below it, another name, Jack Reaves Jr. Someone had already planned my death 20 years ago. I didn't have time to fall apart. The sound of engines cut through the silence into black SUVs kicking up dust in the distance. They'd found me again. I hit the gas, turned south toward the mountains. The desert blurred past like an ocean of rust. But they were faster, tighter. Government-grade engines, probably Kane's private security. I veered off the road, cutting through sand and scrub, the tires screaming. Bullets pinged off the rear bumper. The ledger slid onto the floor. I reached the ridge where the canyon opened up, the same place I'd watched Claire and Mason months ago. How fitting, I thought. It began here. It would end here. I left the car running and climbed up the rock face. The SUV stopped below, doors swinging open. 4 men got out. One of them walked forward, hands raised. "Jack," he called out. It was Mason. He looked different this time, worn, hollow, but alive. "Where's my father?" I shouted. He hesitated. "Gone, for good, this time. He made his choice." "His choice?" I raised the ledger. "You mean this?" He nodded. "You weren't supposed to find it. Then why leave me the clues? The photos, the note, the trail." He looked up at me with something close to sorrow. Because I wanted to see if you were like him. And you are. The men behind him moved closer, weapons drawn. What's in there, Jack? Mason said. Isn't justice. It's poison. Everyone who touches it dies with it. I laughed, bitter. Then why protect it? Because sometimes the lie is the only thing keeping the world together. I stepped closer to the edge. The canyon below shimmered with heat, 1,000 feet of nothing. The ledger felt heavy in my hand. What about Claire? I asked out. His eyes softened. She loved you. That was real, even if everything else wasn't. She tried to leave, but they wouldn't let her. I had to make it look like betrayal, or they'd kill her. The words cut deeper than the bullets ever could. Where is she now? He looked down. Gone. Same night your father disappeared. She tried to run. The wind rose, carrying the scent of heat and dust. Somewhere far off, thunder growled, or maybe it was just memory. I looked at Mason, at the men behind him, at the open desert waiting to swallow us all. Give me the book, Jack, he said. You walk away. They forget you exist. I shook my head. You know that's not possible. He smiled, tired, broken. No, I suppose it isn't. He motioned for the others to lower their weapons. Then he stepped forward, slow, deliberate. So what are you gonna do? Expose them? To who? The government? The press? You think the truth survives out here? He was right. The truth didn't survive in America. It was traded, buried, branded, repackaged, just like people. I took one last look at the ledger, at my father's handwriting, at my name crossed out in neat black ink. Then I threw it into the canyon. The wind caught the pages, scattering them into the abyss like ashes. Mason watched, silent. The men behind him didn't move. You could have sold it, he said quietly. Bought yourself freedom. I don't want freedom, I said. I want silence. He nodded, almost respectfully. Then we're done here. He turned to leave, but I stopped him. What happens now? He paused. You disappear. You become the story they can't finish. That's the only way any of this matters. Will they come after you? He smiled faintly. They already have. He climbed back into the SUV. The others followed. Within minutes, they were gone, just dust and tire tracks fading into the horizon. I stood there for a long time, staring at the canyon. The sun bled across the sky, gold fading to rust out. I thought of Claire, of her laughter, her perfume, her quiet guilt. I thought of my father, the man who died twice, once in fire, once in truth. And I thought of Mason, the ghost who'd shown me who I really was. I'd come looking for vengeance, for clarity, for something to make sense of the ruin. But all I'd found was this: when you dig deep enough into betrayal, all roads lead home. That night, I parked near the diner for the last time. The sign still buzzed faintly, letters flickering. Eat here. I sat in the dark, poured the last of my father's bourbon into a cracked glass, and whispered to no one. Some debts can't be paid in money. Only in silence. I drank, watched the stars blink awake, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel lost. I felt empty, and that was enough.